Ultimately, that's going to be about $2,000 or so of cost, and will put you right around 300 wheel horsepower and 350 wheel torque, which are pretty good power levels out of a little 2-liter turbocharged engine. Hey guys, Jake from 80/20 Automotive. Today we're going to be talking about performance modifications and upgrades for the Volkswagen Jetta, specifically focusing on the Mark 7 and the 2.0 turbo version of the Jetta, which is found in the Jetta GLI. The Mark 7 or MK7 Jetta has been in production since 2018 and of course comes also in a 1.4 liter turbocharged or a 1.5 liter turbocharged engine. And so when it comes to modifications and upgrades, the upgrades that you're gonna do on a 2 liter are gonna be the same for a 1.4 and 1.5 liter. The modifications on this list are relevant to the 1.4 and 1.5. Those engines just of course have a lot less horsepower to start with and also have a little bit less power potential, and so you're not going to see the same level of power gains out of those engines. We are going to focus on the 2.0 liter when I talk about power gains and power levels, but your modification list is going to be looking the same for a 1.4 or 1.5 liter. So this video is valuable for anyone with an MK7 Jetta from 2018 to present. Now the 2.0 TSI version of this engine came with 217 horsepower, but fortunately, with a handful of basic bolt-on modifications, we can actually get this thing up to an over 300 wheel horsepower, and with a few other bonus modifications, you can produce pretty close to 350 wheel horsepower and similar torque levels on these engines with just about $2,000 in modifications. I did want to talk about one thing before we get into this modification list, and that is pre-modding maintenance. The spark plugs and ignition coils on these engines are going to deteriorate a lot more quickly when you're modified, especially when you're running higher boost levels from tuning. So before you add any tuning or modifications to your Jetta, it's a good idea to make sure you've got good spark plugs and good ignition coils. If you are planning on running higher power levels and significantly higher boost, it is a good idea to go ahead and upgrade from standard OEM stock spark plugs to one-step colder spark plugs. So just a general message that ultimately spark plugs and ignition coils don't last quite as long on modified and tuned engines. You're likely to get about 15 to 20,000 miles out of a set of spark plugs before you need to replace them. So if you go ahead and add tuning and these modifications to your Jetta when you have got old spark plugs and old ignition coils on there, it's very likely that you're going to start off by getting a handful of misfires. So make sure that your ignition system is well taken care of and upgrade those spark plugs if you plan on shooting for the 300, 350 plus wheel horsepower level. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump into our first modification, and that of course is going to be engine tuning. Tuning is where all of your big power gains are going to come from. All of the other modifications on this list are really to help support tuning and to help support the higher boost levels that we're going to run. Tuning is the building block, and then everything else is really to help support it and to really help get additional power out of your tune while also improving reliability when tuned. Tuning comes in many different forms. There's a lot of standard plug-and-play devices that can get you anywhere from about 50 to 100 horsepower on these 2.0 engines. The 50 horsepower level is going to be for anyone running just basic 91 or 93 fueling with the other bolt-on modifications that we're going to talk about, but you can get upwards of 100 horsepower out of tuning if you're running a more aggressive tune, or if you look at some alternative fueling options, which I'll mention briefly at the end of this video. So ultimately, for about 500 bucks, you can get a basic plug-and-play tuner that can add anywhere from 50 to 100 horsepower, and it's going to be the main building block for all these additional modifications. It is a must-have from a modification standpoint. Second on our list is going to be an intake system. A lot of people debate whether an intake's worth it or not, but ultimately, once we throw a tuner on these things and we're running higher boost levels, it really helps to free up turbo spool and improve efficiency by getting more air to the turbocharger to help support it and help it do its job at compressing air to tighter, more compact levels. Ultimately, adding an intake to help bring more air in will help improve efficiency, which helps improve power. And lastly, it is going to be good from a reliability standpoint just to take a little bit of stress off of your turbocharger and the rest of the systems on your car. On this, you're looking at about $300 to go ahead and upgrade that. Third on our list is going to be the downpipe. The downpipe is the most important part of the exhaust system because it bolts directly up to the turbocharger. That's where the majority of the back pressure is created within the exhaust system, and so by upgrading the downpipe, we can see the biggest gains throughout the exhaust system by reducing back pressure closest to the turbo. What happens when you have the factory downpipe is it creates a lot of back pressure that then acts as a force against the turbocharger, so it actually slows down turbocharger spool. It makes the turbocharger have to work harder to produce the same boost levels. So by upgrading the downpipe to either a catless or a high flow downpipe, we're able to reduce a lot of that back pressure, which frees up turbo spool. So your turbo is going to be spooling up more quickly, but it's also going to be more efficient, which means it's going to produce less heat. This is both great from a power standpoint, but it's also great from a reliability standpoint to help keep engine temperatures down and keep your turbocharger temperatures down as well. You have a few different options here going catless or high flow. There also are options to upgrade the rest of the exhaust system. There definitely are benefits to doing the rest of the exhaust, but that of course makes it a lot more expensive. And so just doing the downpipe is what's going to give you the best price to performance ratio, because that's where the majority of the gains are going to come from. So after we have tuning, an intake, and an exhaust system, the last modification on my list here is going to be an upgraded intercooler. An intercooler is going to be the most expensive thing on the list. You're probably looking close to about $800. So there are a lot of people who will say, oh, you don't really need an intercooler unless you're going to go ahead and upgrade your turbocharger. I will say that that is relatively true, but at the end of the day, if you really want to maximize performance and maximize reliability when you're tuned, then an intercooler is an extremely important thing to have, because what it's going to do is not only give you a little bit of added power, it's also going to help prevent you from losing power from what's called heat soak. And that heat soak ends up sending hot air into your engine, and you'll noticeably lose power when that happens. And so by upgrading the intercooler, we're sending colder air more consistently into the engine, and ultimately that's huge for reliability. An intercooler is both a performance and a reliability upgrade. So those are the basic 4 modifications that we're talking about here: tuning, an intake, downpipe, and an intercooler, and ultimately that's going to be about $2,000 or so of cost, and will put you right around 300 wheel horsepower and 350 wheel torque, which are pretty good power levels out of a little 2-liter turbocharged engine. But if you want to take things a little bit further before we start talking about getting into forced induction and other significantly more expensive higher power upgrades, there are a few other things that you can do in kind of basic bolt-on form that can help get you closer to that 350 wheel horsepower level, and that predominantly is from E85 fueling. The Jetta GLIs can handle about E30 without requiring fuel pump upgrades and a number of other fueling upgrades, and so just by running a good E30 blend, you can see some pretty decent 15, maybe 20 wheel horsepower gains out of it, but you will need to be running a proper tune that can handle blends of E85. And of course, if you go through all the fueling upgrades and you can run 100% E85, that's when in basic bolt-on form you can start surpassing 350 plus wheel horsepower. To get beyond those levels, you're eventually going to need to start looking at turbocharger upgrades, and that gets quite a bit more expensive and is what will take you right up to about the safe levels of this engine, which are generally considered to be about 450 wheel horsepower. But torque is really the primary killer of these engines, and so you'll want to manage torque and keep torque down to around 425 wheel torque. And then the last kind of bonus modification that I'm going to throw in here is an upgraded diverter valve. The factory diverter valve, which also sometimes called a blow-off valve, even though they're slightly different, is made of plastic. And so once we start talking about higher boost levels, it's possible for the factory diverter valve to fail. And so upgrading to a performance set of diverter valves is something that'll help you hold higher boost pressures once you start talking about turning up the heat from a tuning standpoint. Anyways, guys, that covers it for our list here on modifications for the Jetta GLI. Again, this video is also applicable to the 1.4 and the 1.5 liters. So if you have a Jetta, go ahead and follow this list here and enjoy the added power that you're going to get from it. Just don't expect to be making over 300 wheel horsepower unless you've got the GLI with the 2.0 turbo in it. Anyways, guys, I hope you appreciate this video. If you did, please click that like button, subscribe to our channel, and stay tuned for all the future Volkswagen and Audi content that we have coming.